I have a question for everybody here, actually. We have 26 people here. Out of the folks who are here, how many people do citizen science? Yeah, raising hands or unmute yourself. GCY, see Chelsea, Emma, Will Lytle. I know GCY brings it on their list. I'm trying to go through here. Zeke, keep your hands up. Amy.
I've been on trips with it, but I would not say I'm a citizen science person.
Nice, that's a good show of hands. What's our longest running bug person? How many years we got here? You'll have to unmute yourself, Ted.
Bob Dye, is Bob Dye still running? No, is he? He's been with us since the start. Yeah, I'm a little out of touch these days. Cheyenne's doing all the interacting with folks. Walker McKay's been at it, I think, since day one. Who else? Anybody out there been doing it since 2012? That's when we started this program. So, Chelsea, yeah. No, it's been awesome, and I love hearing the stories, you know, that folks have about how clients jump in and help out, and it sounds like it's a cool activity, and I know we're getting tons of rad data out of it. So,
I know for GCY, the kids really love it. Like they really love getting involved in it. And that's been my experience, at least with the GCY trips that I've done. And all of them have had citizen science on it, and the kids really get into it.
cool.
So yeah, really cool part of the trips.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Going back to the slide where you had the tail race genera from Fontenelle,
Right.
Flaming Gorge, and Glen Canyon.
Right.
And it went, I believe, from 30 down to 12.
It was 50, you know, it was like over 50 at Fontenelle, and then like high 40s at Flaming Gorge, and then 12 at Glen Canyon. Yeah.
I was just curious, is there any switching of genus? I mean, did you include some as you went downstream that you didn't have up at Fontenelle, or is it just purely a loss?
I don't totally understand the question. So is there?
If you have 5 caddisflies,
Yeah.
and then so just said let's work with the number of 5, and when you get down to Glen Canyon, you only have 3. Are those still 3 caddisflies that you started with, or have you switched genus somewhere?
Yeah. I think. Well, we do get a species of caddisfly down in Grand Canyon that is found up in the upper basin too. And Anya actually just had a paper come out that looked at that, the distribution of this one caddisfly. So there is some overlap, you know, across these tailwaters, but generally it's a loss, right? There's a filtering that happens.
Right.
Yeah. So, yep.
We got a question here from Emma Wharton.
Yeah.
What do you think the prediction is going to be? What do you think is going to happen this year? Any prediction?
I think the sediment has been tracking sort of low to moderate. I don't know who was out on the river last year over the spring. I was out in May of 2019, and it was muddy as heck. And so I think, if we have okay growing conditions, boy, the hope is that we get that, right, that 400% increase in caddisfly, something like that again, right? The growing conditions, though, can definitely influence sort of the abundance. And I think that's what we saw in 2019, where it was just so muddy over the spring that in spite of good egg laying, the numbers were down. So that's my hope, is that the numbers are back up this year. So, yeah.
Sam, did you guys have a bug kit on your training trip?
We didn't.
Huh.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah,
I never saw the light.
Yeah. When was that? When you were able to do a trip?
March.
March. Okay.
Yeah, it closed while we were on the river.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah,
So
so Ted, if depending on how this year turns out,
Yeah.
will that determine whether they decide to do future bug flows or not? Is this sort of a make or break, like, come on, bugs, you got to do your thing kind of year?
Maybe. I think, you know, when the discussions were happening about whether or not to do bug flows this year, you know, we already knew the river was closed, right? And so basically folks were sort of told to, you know, tamp down on your expectations for 2020. And so it may be we bought ourselves another year actually with this whole COVID closure. You know, it's not really well fair, I guess, to right to have this be the critical year when we can't monitor it. So that I'm hoping that folks are understanding, you know, and if it turns out we're not able to get back out on the river in mid-June, that you know that we'd still have another year of this experiment. And then I think too, it you know, we're seeing some indications that well, fly fishing up in Glen Canyon actually is measurably improved by the bug flow. So we had an article in was it the spring BQR issue, or maybe it was actually the winter one, where we showed basically the average angler's catching 30% more fish on these weekend low flows than they are during the weekdays. So in some ways, you know, you could justify like continuing doing this thing just based on sort of how it makes fishing better. And then it's, you know, the EIS actually projects that this experiment would be positive for hydropower. I guess right now there's a lot of capacity in the West, but over the next couple of years, more and more coal plants are going to go offline. Did Navajo go offline recently? So as these coal plants go offline, basically, the capacity, the huge capacity that's present at Glen Canyon, they'll be able to get sort of a higher premium on their electricity for it. And so over the 20 years of that LTEMP EIS, it was projected that just doing this would actually be revenue positive for hydropower. So I guess the point of all that is to say that it doesn't look like any resource is being adversely affected by this experiment, and it looks like some are actually being measurably affected. And so, yeah, hopefully people will just be patient with the bugs and give the bugs time to do their thing, and right, not
Right.
turn this experiment off right away. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
We have one more question out there from Allison, which is great. She's going to be
got
the
it.
next speaker. Allison, you want to ask that?
Sure.
It's great.
Yeah, so well, I had two questions, but I'll just ask the second one. So what would be the evolutionary reason that insects that are from the Colorado River might not do well in muddy conditions? Because pre-dam, wouldn't the river have been really muddy all the time?
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I guess, you know, it basically the system's adapted to these generally clear conditions now, you know, and so the species that are there are ones that can handle this totally altered physical template, right? And so, you know, in the context of the new river, essentially, you know, we think that the mud, well, it looks to slow growth, right? That was seen in that graph of the emergence timing. And you know, I guess one other thing about the sort of the muddy pre-dam river, it was loaded with nutrients. There was actually the water was really nutrient rich, you know, much higher nitrogen and phosphorus levels, and then the temperatures were also super warm. And so, you know, you can have a really vibrant sort of detrital based food web if you have that combination of warm temperatures and nutrient rich water. And then you're getting all this leaf litter and things like that coming in during these floods. So these bugs can just go to town on that, right? But now we have a food web that's based on algae. And so when you throw a bunch of mud in there with cold water and low nutrient, it cuts off the food supply for these bugs. So I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yep.
Oh, we got one more question here from Amy.
Right. Yeah. So that was a totally, that's exactly right. So 2018, the spring was clear, but then the monsoon came on pretty good, like in mid-July, right? Whereas in 2019, it was muddy in the spring, which is when sort of these bugs are doing most of their growing. And then the monsoon was super late and almost non-existent, the monsoon. And so, yeah, we think the spring, it looks like, at least based on the data, that the spring actually was more important, that was affecting the growth rates for these larvae, and they weren't putting on the size that they needed to emerge, and that's why the emergence ended up being so late, I guess. So it's, it's cool. I guess, I don't know. This is so neat for me to understand how this whole ecosystems works. And I mean, obviously, I don't know, when we finally put together that graph showing mud and then the emergence timing, I was just blown away, that the system is that responsive to the growing conditions, that these insects, they were that affected by something, and it was that clean. Like, I don't know if y'all know statistics out there, but the R squared on that relationship was like 0.7, which for ecology, that's gold medal sort of thing. So anyway.
Thank you so much, Ted.
Hey,
Thank you.
I had a super quick question. I was wondering if I could ask. So what's the, these eggs are being hatched, like what's the life cycle of these bugs? Does it end up being just a few days? Is it a week? Is it a couple weeks? And ultimately, how many days do we need to keep the water at a similar flow so that these bugs can hatch and help create a thriving environment for these fish and other species to continue to grow and whatnot? What are we actually looking for? Because it sounds like what we're doing isn't quite working well enough. So what are we actually shooting towards?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't say that. These are generally annual lived insects, so it takes them a full year to complete that life cycle. And we're starting from really low abundances in many cases. So, even though we haven't, I mean, we had one really good year and one sort of mediocre year, and it can just take a while for these things to build their populations up, essentially, right? If you're starting from really low numbers. So I think I'm still hopeful that this sort of weekend program is going to work out. I have a hard time believing that bugs could totally shut down, right, hydropeaking operations. I think this sort of win-win strategy, right, where we give bugs what they need every weekend, and then we do hydropeaking on weekdays, that could work out. If it doesn't, we'll just have to see. Yeah, but I'm comfortable sort of letting this flow experiment run for another year or two and seeing what happens. So, yep.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
You got it.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it, Ted.
Hey, my pleasure.
Yeah.
Hey, so we're going to take a quick little break here, 2 minutes.